Oscar Vasquez Butler. I'm former chairman and county commissioner for Doñana County. Also past president of the New Mexico Association of Counties. I served in that capacity 8 years as a board member and surfaced to be president. In that capacity, we had to deal a lot with representatives from different counties, both Republican and Democrat, come up to mutual resolutions to present to the legislature for legislation. A lot of compromise going on, a lot of exchange between party philosophies, and so it gave me an insight as to the dynamics of legislation and compromise. I think that I'm running because of the changes in the legislature. We had quite a few legislators resign or retire. Governor Richardson's no longer there. Van Lujan's no longer there. We have a new governor, and it's a new ball game over there. In order to get some things accomplished, you need a new vision, you need new leadership, you need some optimism. And to accomplish that, you really have to get along with a lot of new legislators. I know that Senator Garcia has had some difficulties with Governor Martinez, so her position there may be somewhat not as strong as it was before. And so with the changes there, with other senators gone, Steve Fishman, Senator Nava, Bernadette Sanchez, Didi Feldman, there's a list of them. So it's going to be a new legislative session there. And I think that with my understanding of that dynamic, working with people, compromising, and not having that history with anybody in the legislature or in the governor's office, that I could achieve and accomplish a lot of things here that need to be done, local challenges.
Yes, and I'm Mary Jane Garcia from Doñana Village, state senator, completing my 24th year. That is, that I've run 6 times successfully. I have been in leadership as a majority whip since 1996. I used to serve on Senate Finance, but when you become a leader, you can't serve on finance any further. So I had to develop new agendas and the like. I served on human services for about 10 or 12 years, and that was really, it was tough because you see all these people coming in wheelchairs and that need help, welfare moms, autistic people, and so I kind of moved to a different agenda that was economic development for the most part. I strongly support rural economic development. Criticized sometimes for what I'm doing in Doñana Village. Those of you that have been there know that that is a gem, and I've been told that by the Secretary of Economic Development, of Cultural Affairs, of Tourism. They've all come to visit our project in Doñana, and it is indeed a gem. We're revitalizing the Camino Real. Our community is the only one left on Camino Real that is pristine. So we're planning for a Cinco de Mayo fiesta shortly. I strongly believe that I have been through, I think, four governors. Gary Carruthers was there when I was elected, and Gary King, and Gary Johnson, and then Richardson. I've served very well under all of them. I got along really well with all of them. To say that I don't get along with Susana is our differences of opinion in certain issues. That's what it is. Both of us are very strong on the issue of child abuse and public safety. And had a wonderful bill in this session. She vetoed it. I don't know that she understood the gist of it. And you're familiar with it. I want every sexual predator in New Mexico to be put in prison forever with no parole or anything. Just as if they had killed a policeman or a correction officer, hired someone for murder. That was the intent of my legislation. It passed the House without a single opposing vote. It passed the Senate with 2 opposing votes. And I tried to talk to her afterwards, but she had her way, and it was her way. That's the thing with Governor Martinez. It's her way or the highway, like Gary Johnson, if you recall. So it is more difficult to work with her than it's been in the past. I've done very well under Richardson. I've done equally or even better under Bruce King, because they knew how to work with the legislature. You know, Governor King used to say, I'm the CEO, you're my board of directors. I know I have to work with you. And he worked beautifully with all of us. Let me give you an example. In the first 60-day session, about 90% of my colleagues in the Democratic caucus had never even seen Susana Martinez as governor. Never saw her once. I said, you're kidding me. Well, I got to see her twice, once in the elevator and a second time in a forum where they always invite me to speak on child abuse, and she was there. We greeted each other formally. But that's not to say that I will get along with the rest of the colleagues. I don't care who's elected, I will get along with them. You know, I'm a people's person. I've done a lot for my community and for the state of New Mexico.
Senator, we'll start with you on the first question. The issue of Andy Nunez's bill that would have prevented illegal immigrants from being able to get driver's license in New Mexico was one that really commanded a lot of attention the last 2 years, and as well in the special session. We know that you voted against that bill, and I'd like to ask you, first of all, just to describe, what your feelings are on that bill, and then more broadly, are there any other changes in state laws or regulations that you think need to be made regarding the issue of immigration?
Okay. First of all, yes, I did vote against it, and I probably will if it comes forth again. It may not, because there's other issues that are more important right now to the governor, I think. The reason I voted against it is because, I'm thinking of the industries that would be the losers. If we whipped everybody back to Mexico or wherever, what is the hospitality going to do? The hotels, the restaurants. You talk to any server in Santa Fe and you ask them where they're from, and if they're from Mexico, they're not documented. They don't have driver's licenses. And yet the hotel and the restaurant is full of them from all over, not only Mexico. That was the one issue. I looked at it economically, actually. Then how are these people going to get their children to school without a license, or to a doctor, or to wherever they need to be, to church? And I'm in a community that's 99% Hispanic, and probably a great majority of them are from Mexico. Some have been there before I was even born. Now I'm 75 years old, and I don't care. I don't mind who knows that. But yeah, that was a reason I did it, for human purposes. These people need to get around. And when we did the bill originally under Richardson, it was because of the high rates of uninsured people. And if you got hit by an uninsured person, you were out money, So that's why we did it. And it seemed that the percentages of underinsured were lowering. It was working very well. It had never become an issue until Governor Martinez was elected. To me, it seemed like it was part of the national GOP agenda, perhaps, that she needs to follow. But she couldn't get it through the Senate, and I don't know if she could now. I will continue to vote against it for those very reasons.
Yeah, that is a wedge issue among the Hispanic community. And I think what hasn't been done is really go back to the Richardson study. Because as you understand, we're not into immigration. We're trying to promote any kind of immigration policy that would affect, you might say, the rights of citizens or non-citizens. It's an immigration issue per se. Andy Nunez, what he did was he created the wedge issue before the governor was in office, and the governor picked it up coming in. And yes, it is trying to take away, you might say, the licensing of illegals and the social implications of that, whether those illegals are married to American citizens, and then you have anchor children or immigrant citizens here, and the effects that have on the families, the creation of maybe another cycle of poverty, and creating that separation of employment and health and education and the things that they're needed to succeed in life. Having said that, where Andy Nunez uses this busload of people going to the DMV to get licenses, let me tell you, that only tells me there's a situation of transportation in the field workers that once they go to the DMV, maybe just the driver needs licensing, and you have a truckload full of immigrants or labor or people going from one field to another. But to exaggerate the point, I think is what he's creating, the xenophobic feelings in the community. Lastly, we haven't really looked at why Governor Richardson, put that bill forward. When you look at the state's responsibility equal to the counties, the public safety and health and welfare of our citizens, yes, the driver's license, it's an identification card, but it also requires insurance. And prior to that, we were getting complaints, many complaints, on a statewide basis where people did not have driver's license, they're still driving without them. People did not have insurance, they're still driving without them. And yet this was trying to minimize the liability on the backs of all taxpayers, trying to minimize the consequences of somebody injuring you in your later years or in your younger years and doesn't have insurance, create a liability and further a liability on the taxpayers in terms of covering insurance and other things that are a consequence of people not having driver's license or insurance. So we have to go back to what created the bill and the reasons for it, get out of immigration in a sense, and at the same time look at the public safety and health and welfare of our citizens, and which is the best legislation to ensure or minimize the liability upon them and the drain of our tax dollars.
Okay. If I might, just for clarification, Oscar, so help me get my head around this. If you were in the Senate, the current bill that Andy put forth, would you have voted for it or against it?
I would have voted against it. At the same time, had some amendments to that.
Understand.
Right.
Okay.
Early childhood education, and specifically in terms of reading for children in the 3rd grade or lower. Mary Helen Garcia introduced a compromise bill on that issue that wasn't able to get through this year. As you look at all of the proposals that were suggested, including retention, but also reading coaches and many other things, what do you think the best approach is to bringing our students in New Mexico up to the same level as their peers throughout the country?
Well, initially, I think at the 11th hour, more recently, the governor put more resources in those levels to help them along with reading. So that's what's really needed. I don't support holding any kid back at the 3rd grade. I think the resources are what's needed. Keep in mind that currently I'm vice chair with Avance. Avance, what we do is pre-kinder education from birth to 3 years of age. We're also getting together collectively with the Reading Foundation to provide further education from 3 to 5 years of age. We're also getting together with the Hispanic Education Initiative to provide education from 5 to 7 years of age. It's an approach that you're dealing with parents in the classroom with children, and we know that the first classroom is the home. But when you get the parent in the classroom with the child, and you have that relationship building from birth to 3 and then extend it to 5 years of age and 7 years of age, we're building that resource, that sense of confidence with our children, with our parents. The school districts have said they've opened the gates or to invite parents in, but they do nothing to make sure that parents have transportation into the classroom. What Avance does is we have vans, we go out and pick them up, we bring them into the classroom, they are adapting to a classroom setting, and the parents and the child are interacting together. If that, in conjunction with Governor Martinez's additional resources, I think we're addressing the problem. But it's all about resources, and it's not about holding kids back. Because the psychological, the embarrassment, and just putting people in that particular level, it's only going to increase dropout rates. It's only going to increase poor self-esteem. And we're trying to motivate kids to go forward. And when we see a 55% dropout rate in our kids, we got to do something.
I didn't support the 3rd grade retention of children, and Governor Martinez thought that I was going to introduce her bill and pass it, and I could have, but I didn't, because during the interim I started talking to parents and to teachers, and nobody seemed to want it. And I thought, you know what, 3rd grade is a little late for children to be reading. I think they need to start earlier. I had a niece who was with a group called Parents as Teachers, and she went into the home, and even the parents came out all dressed wanting to learn English. And she would work with tiny little tots. We need to begin very, very early on. There's a study done by a lady that she wrote a book, Ghost from the Cradle, after the Columbine massacre. You recall that? And she tracked the serial killers and discovered that a child inside of the womb, if that mother is, battered or whatever, shaken, the little child, by the age of, I think she said, 5, that little child, something happened in his brain, and he thinks he's a grown-up man and starts bringing guns to school by age 9. So I looked at those statistics of early childhood education. I strongly believe I was very excited to vote on the pre-kinder bill because I thought, oh my God, how exciting to have children kind of be prepared to go into kinder and then on. So we're starting too late. And so when I told the governor I couldn't do it it was a public press conference, and everybody was just totally aghast. But I had to do what I had to do. I do not believe in punishment of children. They're stigmatized. They think, oh my God, I'm stupid, I can't keep up. And, we need to help the children along. We need to help them. And yes, Representative Mary Helen had a bill. She developed it from an education committee of which I serve on. But there were others, many others. And we're all about early childhood education. We tried to do a constitutional amendment because we heard that's the way we had to go to get money. We need like $350 million to put that into place. Well, Susana's thinking Florida. She brings this girl from Florida with 8 others from Florida from Jeb Bush's campaign, and she's telling teachers how to teach. She's never been in a classroom. We haven't confirmed her yet. I don't know that we will. But we're not Florida, and we don't have the resources to put 2,000 tutors in place like they did in Florida. We lack the resources. And I think that the administration was fighting for, I think it was something like $55 million from Race to the Top. And they failed the first time. I think second time around they'll do better. But if we don't have the resources in place, we're not going to do anything in education.
The state finally this past year emerged from what had been a 2 or 3 year budget crisis. This was the first year that you actually had some new money to spend as opposed to having to cut like you had been doing the years before that. As you look at the budget, what do you think the priorities should be as you get that new money in terms of restoring or adding to programs that may have been cut in the past? And on the opposite side, what areas are there in state government that you think may be a little bit bloated and where there could be more money trimmed?
Well, many of us were shocked to see some of the cuts that were made. A lot in education, of course, you've got the teachers screaming. But I hate to see any cuts in education, actually. When I was elected, half of the budget went to education. That's from elementary up to higher ed. And now we're at like 43 or something %. So we've been cut all along. And we've been making that argument all along through Cynthia Nava. And we looked at those figures. None of us wanted education to be cut, and it was. I think she cut in the wrong places, the public employees. She probably enhanced or put more money into public safety, a lot more policemen. They're more visible. And I like that because I feel better. I feel safer when I drive to Santa Fe and I see all these policemen all around there. They were bloated, I think. Anything that helps with children, with education, with families, enhancing the quality of life is where that money should go. And I remember how that money came through the new money and everybody went berserk. Everybody wanted a piece of that cake, of that pie. But it's really up to the governor. She cuts the pie in the end and it's to her good, we just wait there in anticipation and then, I hated seeing my bill gutted on the public safety with the child abuse. But I think I'll have to. And she told me at the mansion, she said, you and I need to meet. I said, let's do it. When can we get together? And I expected that she would call me because it was about maybe a week before we closed the session. And I was waiting for her call, and it never came. Session ended, we left, everything I did was vetoed. And I said, oh, well, maybe next time she'll do better. I have to be nicer to her or something. Thank you.
Well, having a background in human resources, that I retired out of human resources. When you have a large surplus of money, any agency will tend to increase programs and projects. And that seems to be the case with any company as well. You always have a surplus. I think that if you're gonna downsize a little bit because of austere years, you have to revisit those programs and projects. You have to probably go into zero-based budgeting to see what kind of programs and budgets were increased as a result of a certain increase or surplus area. And so to do that, you look at every agency, number of employees, programs, etc. And in addition to that, you look at what are the priorities of the state. When you look at southern New Mexico, and we're looking at water, and we're looking at education, and we're looking at economic development, then I think you start paring down towards those specifics so that you're trying to accomplish on a statewide basis what it is that where do we want to go and what's the goal and how do we get there in terms of that particular objective. So I think that in the state we're currently starting to get out of the deficit area, get into the surplus area. Even at that, we should reemphasize water here. We're in an arid, dry, drought situation. We're competing farm water with economic development, with residential, commercial, and industrial growth. When do we have a smart water plan? When do we have a growth plan? When do we have a comprehensive infrastructure plan that has emergency tie-ins and loop our water lines and put septic tanks and wastewater systems? It's because we're not going to have economic development until we have all the infrastructure systems. Guyana, the village, is not a criticism towards the senator, but they have water, they have wastewater. They are starting to have commercial development there. That Mesilla is the model. For the exception of Doñana Village, everything else was really improved through the Colonias initiative in the county, and I'm very proud of that particular project. But keep in mind that water, education, economic development is a global goal for this state. We have to start balancing that. The other thing I would say on water is that it's unfortunate there isn't legislation that this Rio Grande Compact and the water that we deliver to Texas and to Mexico, that the whole state isn't involved. You know, the Mexican-American War, that was a state issue, not was just Doñana County and Sierra County. We have to revisit that. We have to see why northern and the middle Rio Grande aren't part of sharing this water that we're sending down to Mexico and Texas. So when we see that, yeah, we're depleting our aquifer, the McNutt-Hawk Basin, the Jornada Basin, they're closed basins, the Mesilla Bolson, yes, that's the one that's getting recharged. Mexico's drilling into it, Texas is drilling into it, we're drilling into it, but nobody's sharing on the responsibilities under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And that's where we have to go. But we have to concentrate on those particular three areas: water, education, economic development, and make sure that we're balancing growth with those three areas. Because employers want educated people, and we're not going to bring anybody to the Southwest that we don't have water.